I'd like to introduce Ellie O'Brien of Northwestern University Simulation Department. Ellie has been instrumental in the medical modeling activity at Northwestern for the last 8 years, and she was involved in the evaluation, justification, purchase, and implementation of 3D Systems MJP 2500 Plus. I'd like to thank Ellie for joining us today and sharing the challenges of her responsibilities at Northwestern and experiences with the 2500 Plus. So Ellie, could you tell us a little bit about you and your staff and what you do at Northwestern and how 3D printing has benefited that activity?
Sure. So I work in the simulation lab, specifically in the innovations portion. And what we do is support the medical education that happens at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. And we really design simulation models for medical education and research. The innovations portion that I run is staffed solely by me. So we, or I and my summer interns, and I have a few part-time students who are undergraduates at the university. We work one-on-one with physicians to design medical models to fill the gaps in the education that they're teaching.
So this is primarily for medical applications related to education?
Yes.
Okay, great. So it sounds like medical modeling and simulation is the biggest part of the service you provide to professors and surgeons. How did the demanding requirements of those models influence your decision to bring in the 2500 Plus?
Sure. So as you mentioned earlier, I've been with the lab for about 8 years. And when I first started, we weren't doing any 3D design or any 3D printing. Everything was just done by hand. And I really tried to push us towards 3D printing and 3D design because we wanted to make more anatomically accurate models. We wanted to be able to provide our students with the same experience, and 3D printing would allow us to do that. So the reason I ended up choosing the MJP 2500 Plus was mostly because of the multi-material function of it. I was previously using another printer that was a powder plaster based, which I really loved for mold making, but it didn't yield a lot of the parts that we could put directly in our models. So having the ability to print both in a hard and soft plastic right in the lab was really the biggest deciding factor. And another thing is my space is pretty small. My old printer was very large. So being able to decrease the footprint of the printer in my space, as well as like decrease all of the post-processing that I had to do from before. The post-processing with the MJP is so easy. And so just a few of the main factors that went into this purchase.
Oh, great. What about 3D Systems and Nota? Did that come into the play in the decision on bringing in that machine?
Yeah, so the previous printer I had was an old Z-Core, which was acquired by 3D Systems. So I was used to working with 3D Systems already, and Nota was my partner for that, and they were already servicing the machine. So the transition to getting a new printer, it was just so easy and seamless to do it through 3D Systems and Nota. We were able to just swap my old one out for the new one.
Great.
Yeah, it was a breeze.
So how long have you had your machine now?
I've had the MJP since last July, so just under a year.
Oh, great, great. What materials do you typically use in that machine? Are you using the armor or some of the other materials?
So I haven't actually used the armor yet. I've, excuse me, been using just like I'm gonna end up using like the material name for it that I know I buy based on the consumable list. But both like the white and clear, I think it's like the W2R white and clear hard plastic.
Okay.
And then I've just started using I don't even know what you guys call it, but more of like the softer.
The material with the better yield strength.
Yes.
More flexible, yes. Okay,
yes.
Okay. So over the last year that you've had the machine, I'm sure you've done numerous projects that were successful. Could you share a little information on some of those projects and how having the 2500 Plus benefited the output?
Sure. So I spent the majority of the last year working on two main projects, both of which that were similar to each other, but I was working to design an ultrasoundable model that would train physicians how to access the femoral artery under ultrasound, place a catheter, and then be able to like snake the catheter up to the heart. So this is a very common thing that happens in the cath lab and has to be done under ultrasound. And so what I ended up doing was designing, I refer to it as a cassette, but it's essentially like a rectangular piece that has the femoral artery and the femoral vein that I designed in SolidWorks, 3D printed the molds for, first just 3D printed straight on the MJP to test for size and shape and just looking at if the anatomy was accurate. Once we determined that, ended up designing the inverse of it, 3D printing that inverse mold, and then casting silicone with some ultrasoundable things in it to get us the final part that we could put into our model. So I did. So
the silicones you use, are those a UV cast silicone, or are those like a two-part silicone that harden because of the two-part mix?
There are two. I use a two-part mix.
I was wondering if you use like a clear material, if the UV would radiate through the mold and you could curate inside with a UV silicone. So I know there's a lot of medical grade silicones that are UV curable.
Yeah, I actually haven't used any UV cured ones thus far. Mine have all been two-part mixes, but lots of, you know, it's so funny. I went to school for biomedical engineering. I'm not a material scientist, and I don't even know if material scientists would just have this innate sense of these sorts of materials. So every new project, in addition to the design and the print of the mold or the part itself, is a lot of trial and error and figuring out what materials best simulate whatever the tissue in the body is that we're trying to simulate. So
is the majority of the data you get all through CAD, or do you do some direct scan data to produce parts?
We do direct scan data too. And actually one of the other projects that I spent some of this last year doing was working with a neurologist, and they were training their residents how to place a drain in the lumbar spine. And all the models on the market were looking at lumbar. So your lumbar spine curves. There's a curve in it down to your tailbone, and all of the models on the market, everything is straight. And so being able to access the space between your vertebrae when it's straight is a lot easier than when it's curved and that space is really small. So what we ended up doing for his project is actually taking a scan of someone with normal anatomy but has the curve in the lumbar spine, segmenting out the part that we want, editing it, 3D printing the spine itself, and then designing a mold around it that we could place the spine into and cast silicone around that spine to get a final part that has an anatomically accurate spine and makes placing the lumbar drain much more realistic to what they would see in a real human. Wow,
wow. Does the machine you have handle your capacity requirements now, or are you pretty much busy on the machine?
Right now, it's been handling it pretty well. I also have access to the rapid prototyping lab at Northwestern's engineering school, and they have an array of other printers. They also have an old Z-Core powder-based printer. They have an Objet 250. They have a Stratasys Fortis. So it's pretty nice because depending on what I want my final material to be, I can just pick and choose which printer. And so between my stuff and their lab, I have enough. Yeah.
Hey, with the current issue with Corona, are you finding that you're getting your jobs done? Since you're working from home right now, are you going in to run the machine at all?
No, I am not allowed to be on campus.
Oh boy.
So I have not had the printer on since I think March 16th was the last day I was allowed to be on campus. So I shut it off before I left, and I've been designing things, and I'm just like waiting until I can get back on campus and it'll be up and running. Day
Sounds like you're gonna be pretty busy when you get back.
Yes, I will be. Yeah.
Okay, well, to sum it up, what would you say the main benefits to Northwestern that you've realized as a result of the MJP 2500 plus?
You know, for me, the biggest thing is just having something like right in my space that I can just pop on the printer and have it done hours later to test shape and size of something. But I love the fact that you can swap materials and have the flexibility of a hard or a soft material, using the armor, using something that's, you know, less or more brittle. I absolutely love that. And honestly, it's so easy to use. Like I think, is it 3D Sprint? The computer
The
program
software?
that goes along with
Yes.
it is just like seamless to use. Getting things on and off the printer are easy. Like I said before, the post-processing is like a dream compared to what I was doing before.
Yeah.
So it's been great. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Great. Well, thanks for sharing your experiences with us today. If you have any questions for Ellie, please type them in and we'll get you responses as quick as possible. And again, thanks again for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ellie.